Yeah. All
Okay.
right.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Mike Pucciarelli, and tonight I'll be talking about the Canon R5 mirrorless camera. I first just want to, talk about who I am. As you may or may not know, I'm very addicted to still life photography in all forms. I also like other types of photography. I started out as a landscape photographer. I like to use natural light using continuous light when I first did still life, and then I moved to flash using still life. And then there's light painting, and I did that I started several years ago, and I've been using the Canon 7D for like a decade, and then about a year from now, I started using the Canon R6. And this camera I got this year, I got around in April, and this camera is very similar to the Canon R6. And I'm also part of, Professional Photographers of America, the American Society of Photographers, and also several affiliate clubs associated with Professional Photographers of America. So I play an active role in helping people learn still life photography. So tonight, we'll be talking about the Canon R5. So this is what the camera will look like for manual, for still life. I like to use manual because I use flash a lot. And you'd be like f16 shutter 1/25th. Maybe I could put it to 1/250th. I always want to have the ISO 100. I know in other parts of the Canon R5, there's ways to make all this automatic, but I like to use manual and set everything. And for bulb, I'd be f16. It would say B here. And sometimes I'd have exposure many seconds long, like 30 seconds, 28 seconds, maybe even longer. So I always want to shoot RAW plus JPEG. I only use the JPEG for the Wi-Fi viewing because you can use the JPEGs to view photos on the phone. So I do my editing in the condensed RAW. And the condensed RAW is about the same as the regular RAW. It's about 45 megs, but I've never had any problems using condensed RAW. And I'll talk about all these settings in more detail later. So I start with the CR3, and then I convert it to the DNG with the DNG converter. And it's a DNG you can run on any operating system in the future. CR3, you may have a hard time using it on a future operating system. And that's why I've been using the DNG converter for about 2 years. And it's on autofocus, AI focus. The drive mode, where I always want to be using the single shooting mode, because in still life photography and light painting, I like to work in one shot at a time. And I always be shooting with the cable release or remote cable, where you just have it's done by remote. But lately I've been just using the cable release for the Canon R5. And then I've used all these. And this box to the most right is a 2-second exposure. And this box is a 10-second exposure. 10-second exposure is great for cell portraits, or if you just want to give everybody 10 seconds to get ready in the photograph. In the H and H plus is for high-speed continuous, H is for low speed. These are all very good to use, and I've used them all. But I always want to be on a tripod with the cable release or remote cable release. And especially when I do like the bracket exposure, which I'll talk to you later. I talk about the picture style mode, where I like to use S because it applies a little sharpening to the image. And this settings are sharper than the P for portraits and also sharper than the L for landscape. It's also sharp for the FD. Neutral means no settings applied, and F has other settings. M stands for monochrome, where the pixels are affected in a black and white style. I know people use this. I don't want to affect the pixels. I don't want to do a little sharpening. That's why I do S. Or if I don't want to do any sharpening, use D. And then A, I think everything is automatic for the sharpening. So the difference is in these settings. And the 1, 2, 3 is, these are user settings where 1, you could have a certain amount of settings, like a low aperture. 2, you can have a big aperture. And 3, you can have a very sharp shutter speed. You can also adjust the sharpening other features using 1, 2, or 3. So when you use 1, 2, or 3, settings are all done. Like if you're doing wildlife photography, you might want to have 1 where the aperture is really wide, or maybe if you want to have the aperture 2 where the aperture is really, really narrow. So there's, user settings you can do a lot with, but I just like to use, the S setting. Focus mode, I just like to leave it on the zone autofocus because it sharpens parts of the photograph. And the others are good. I tried with the vertical and the horizontal. They're also very good if you have like a narrow, tall shot or a wide shot. The vertical and horizontal are good. But I recommend, I just use the zone autofocus more than the 1053. Because the zone autofocus, the pixels are set faster. But mirrorless, these are all great to use. Mirrorless is a step, many steps up from the camera used to use. Canon 70 used to use 19 focus points, but this is a big upgrade. The 60, R6 and R5, they both use a 1053 point focus. In the single point, you move the cursor where you like it. In the spot autofocus, it's like, single point of focus on steroids. It's great for macro photography. I've heard great things about the spot autofocus. And the thing about the R5 and R6, it has tracking. And this is the square over here where you can set the subject to humans. You could enable the eyes. You could also set the subject to animals. You could also set the subject to like vehicles, but I like to use the tracking for portraits. And then sometimes, with the white balance is I either use the daylight white balance or I just manually set the Kelvin to 5400 to 5600. I never use the AWS. I know some people use the video and they love it and they're happy. That's fine. If your clients are happy, that's fine too. The AWS is the least natural. You could be putting artificial color in the photograph. Then there's custom white balance where you don't have to worry about the focus. You can just take a picture of a white card or a gray card and you can do a custom white balance. Now, the thing about the custom white balance is that when the light changes, you got to do custom white balance. And that's why I rather use, the daylight option, which is the sun thing here, or you can set the Kelvin and you set the Kelvin here. Now, the others, daylight, the other presets are great to use, and they have specified, specific temperatures. See, auto is too much of a big temperature range. Sometimes I can use flash. Sometimes even when I do flash, I just want to manually set the Kelvin to like 5400, 5600. High-speed ISO noise reduction, I always disable it because, software today like Topaz, Camera Raw, we could take out the noise. Low may be good to use, but I never use standard. Maybe if you want to use standard, it's a very high ISO. With a properly exposed image, I disable this. And it's better to use a setting, better not to use a setting than to use it. And the long exposure noise reduction, where autos for automatic enable is an algorithm is always happening no matter what you do. So when you take a shot and you enable it, algorithms are happening. And if you're doing like the 4th of July fireworks, I would not use enable. I wouldn't also not use auto, but so I also disable this because I usually have a properly exposed image. So early DSLRs, they had the problem where if you take firework pictures, you may have blue streaks, and that's why they have this setting. But today's DSLRs, you almost don't even need this setting. Color space, I know some people like to start with sRGB. You have 60.7 million colors to work with. I like to start with the Adobe RGB, and that's 57 billion colors, which is many more than the sRGB. And then some people, I know that they like to start with maybe ProPhoto, which is over 281 trillion colors, but you know that the human eye can only recognize like 2 or 3 million colors. So, and there's some people are happy starting with sRGB. I like to start with the Adobe RGB. And when I use the sRGB for the web, I want to make sure I check off the sRGB profile. But if I copy and paste in Photoshop, I want to make sure I don't have it checked off because I don't want to mess up the color space when I copy and paste in Photoshop. CNY is for printing. Now, the cropping aspect ratio, like the R6, the R5 is also full frame, and I would just use full because you have all the pixels to use. You have complete pixel power. And the 1.6 is for the sensor C lens. You don't use all the pixels, and the same with the others, but the others have good uses, but for the complete pixel power, use full. Now, auto exposure bracketing, where it's great for shooting the same image with different exposure readings. Like, suppose my aperture like 8 and my regular shutter was 1/25th. I would do one stop under a regular and then one stop over. And the reason why I want to use one stop, because if I do two stops, the underexposed file have like highlight problems and they'll have data problems, and you won't be able to work with all the pixels. That's why I just wanted to use one stop, so the files and detail easier, and you won't have highlight tones blinking. Now the AF, continue AF. When I bought my R6, the thing was always moving, so I would just shift the focus from automatic to manual. Because you'd also disable it, where when you disable it, you focus when you push the shutter. It's better than enable because the sensor will always be focusing. So, and it's better to be in control of the focus than to have the thing always focus. And it's better to disable it. And that's why, we want to disable the focus, so you're in control of the focus. Then for the exposure increments, I like to use 1/3 increments, and the same thing with the ISO. Because, there's 3 stops, 1 stop, 2 stop, 3 stops, 1 stop. And you'd also have many more than 3 brackets for an image. You can have like 9, 11, but I always still use 3. Now, the Canon R5, like the Canon R6, they both could use the SDXC, SDHC. The XC card is a faster card than the HC, and this is great for the photographs. And there's a difference between speed. We have, like, the XC ending is 10 times faster than the HC ending card, and you have a lot more space than the HC card. But both cards are good to use. The R5 uses the video card. You can put data on this card. You can also put 4K and HD video. And the speeds are great. The read speed's like 1750 megabits per second, and the write speed's about 1,000 or more per second. And the thing about, like the R6, the R5, you can record to both cards. You can record to multiple cards. You can have an auto switch. You can just record separately. Sometimes I just have 1 card, so it will just display 1. But then if I have 2, it'll have 1, 2. Some people do is they have 2 cards where 1 card, they delete the file if they don't like it, and the other card still has a deleted file in case, for backup. Now, image quality, I'd like to use a C, and it's about the same size as the RAW. It's 45, megs. And I like to use the SG for the smallest JPEG, which is 3.8. And I use the SG for the Wi-Fi viewing. I do all my editing in the RAW. The camera produced a big RAW file, and then I convert it to a DNG ending file. And DNG stands for digital negative. It's really just called digital negative. This is the Wi-Fi. There'll be a presentation on this where they recommend that you use the Bluetooth for the connection. So all you have to do is connect with your Bluetooth and you're connected. And you may have to probably disconnect from your Wi-Fi. Bluetooth will always work no matter where you are. Wi-Fi, you may have a problem. If airplane mode, you can enable Wi-Fi settings. You can also enable Bluetooth settings. And this is the nickname of my camera, R6. And if it's R5, it'd be EOS R5. These are my still life groups. Still life fine art photography creative group. You have the architect city group. So I run the first 2 by myself. The next 2, photography display, gallery international, sculpture light, are run with other people. The dramatic photography, product photography group are run by myself. The marvelous landscape, I run with other people. And these are my meetup clubs. My business links, Instagram, it's just at Michael Pucciarelli. You can follow me there. My Twitter, my Far Out website. I'm going to bring this up. My Far Out website. And I have light paintings. I have plexiglass reflections. I also have old products where I just use continuous light. So this is light paintings where I use LED flashlights, and I use flash for this, and I can use flash or continuous light for the old-fashioned products gallery. For portfolio, I'm always updating this. This is my latest light painting. This is a product where I have two strip lights for this, and I have an umbrella to make this smooth. Two strip boxes, and I also have maybe a mirror. I think I have an umbrella. The light painting. Still trying to work on light painting a car. Light painting a car I'm struggling with, but I feel like I am getting better. And I love this is how I started photography. Waterfalls. I was using a Tiffin neutral variable and neutral density filter. And I experiment. I always bring my R5 and R6, and I use them both. Like horses in Chincoteague. Little light painting. Flash. The flash and black plexiglass. The flash and white plexiglass. Another black plexiglass. This is my YouTube channel. I'm going to bring that up. So here's where I have several playlists. I have like 5 playlists where I have equipment and still life and light painting. I have light painting webinars and how to use Photoshop with it. I have black plexiglass webinars, white plexiglass webinars, and also Adobe Photoshop webinars. So maybe you can like and subscribe. Got to have 1 or 2 videos a month. So, do you have any questions? You can always email me at mpucciarelliart2016@gmail.com, or you can contact me at Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. So, Peter, do you have any questions?
No, I like the images that you shared, though. They looked very interesting.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. I'll be sure to go look at YouTube and so forth.
So the recording this will be on the YouTube channel, and I'll post it in all the groups too.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you for letting me give this webinar.
Yep. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.